All right, what's up, everybody? So my name is Guido, and today I'm going to share in this video my closing framework from end to end and how to master that yourself. So I've used this closing framework to close over $1 million at this point and more, and all my clients also use it successfully. So this is a framework I've learned from a lot of different people, and it's basically putting the best parts of the people that I've learned from in sales into one script and one framework that has worked really, really well for me. So let's get straight into it. Let me share my screen here. And first of all, the way this process is divided is into three phases. Okay. Um, Phase number one is just being able to ask the right questions and getting the right answers. That's phase number one, which is what we're going to go through first. Phase number two is how do you show up with the right energy onto the call and follow specific tactics and energy kind of ways of displaying yourself so that people are attracted to you, right? And can actually trust you and then buy from you. And number three is how do you handle objections and also pre-handle and even prevent objections from showing up in the first place. So let's start with the first one, which is how to ask the right questions. It's basically the framework, how to ask the right questions and get the right answers. So in this framework here, in this closing script, we have the process is divided into 5 parts, which is 6 parts, sorry. Aim, now, dream, commit, pitch, and doubts. Okay, meaning aim is get the aim of the call. Now is what's happening right now, right? Getting their current situation and their problems. Dream is where they're trying to get to. Commit is getting them to commit by asking hard questions. And then pitch is presenting the solution, which is your program. And doubts is handling any remaining doubts to then close them. Okay. So let's start with aim. And as you can see here on the right side, there's a comment for each of these sections that tells you exactly what you're looking for in each of the questions. So the first thing you want to do is connect with them, right? Which is asking basically, can you hear me and see me? And is your name confirming their name, right? Basically, the goal is just to have something to segue into something else. We'll get to that in a second, but you don't want to do a lot of small talk unless the person is really, really cold, because that's basically what everybody else does. And so it's going to make you seem a little bit salesy. The best way to connect is to ask really powerful questions, be with the right energy, with the right curiosity as you're asking the questions, so they can actually connect with you, right? So to show that you actually care and you're not just wasting their time. So the main goal of this section is to get the purpose of the call. Okay, that's the one thing. If you've had to do anything in that section, it would be that. Okay. The first part of that first section is to what I mentioned, right? Just connect with them, check that the tech is working, and do small/connect if needed. Okay. Second thing is basically the frame and asking the purpose of the question. Okay. So just to see where you are right now and where you'd really like to go, and if we could even help, I guess what's the main reason that made you book the meeting? Okay. See how I'm adding certain words like I guess, or it's called neutral language, right? To make the question sound a little bit more better, basically, right? And so the goal is to set the frame and expectation for the call and then get the real purpose of why they hopped on the call. Okay. The third thing is to make sure you want to have videos, right? That you send before, or a video usually, um, before the call starts, right? So that they are sold on your mechanism before they hop on a call, on your story and your mechanism. Okay. But just to make sure you're kind of gauging the traffic quality, right? Warmness, you want to ask this question just to be sure. So was the video we sent you helpful, or is the story and how we help still confusing? Okay, you want to confirm with that. These two, the sub points I'll get to in the third phase, which is handling the issues. Okay. So check that they watch the videos. Okay. And then they understand your story and what makes you different, your mechanism. Let's move on to the now section. So the goal of the now section is to get 1 to 3 problems, okay, and their emotional impact, and then close all doors. What are doors? Well, doors are potential objections, right? We'll get to that in phase 3. But basically, it's making sure that there's nothing that at the end of the call makes them be like, oh, I got to think about it, or, well, I'm still considering if I should do this other thing, right? Which is not, it's counterproductive. So that's what we have to do. So how do we do that, right? We have to go through these 7 questions. Okay. So the first question is, what are you doing now to goal, and how long have you been doing that? This is a situation question, and it basically gets their current situation and how long it's been happening. And the goal is to set up the rest of the questions, right? Because if you ask right away, deep questions like, why hasn't it worked? What's your main problem? And things like that, people might not be kind of ready for that. because you haven't like built enough rapport. So this question helps to build rapport and just to get a light kind of idea where they're at in their situation. Once you've asked these two questions, you want to move on to the second one, which is based on what they told you in stage 2. Okay, when you ask them why they booked the meeting, they're probably going to give you some kind of problem or constraint that they have at the moment, and so you want to connect back to that and say something like, "You mentioned pain, right? Or you mentioned problem. I guess, how do you mean by that? Or pain? Or tell me more about it," right? You want to ask these questions to dive deeper and identify a problem. And then from problem, you want to get to pain. That's it. You can get one really strong problem and pain, and you're good. You don't need more, but more can help. And that's why in the third one, we ask, besides problem one, what else would you change about your situation? Right? So you're getting multiple problems and multiple pains, right? A problem is logical, a pain is emotional, just so you know the difference. So for the second part, you want to probe into the problem statements in order to get valuable details and clarity, right? Stop probing once you've gotten full clarity on that problem and the pain associated, okay? And also there's another way to get the pain, which is the impact question, which is number 4. And then number 3, you're also get up to 3 problems using this question, right? The more ammo, the better, but don't force it. If they're not giving you anything more, just move on. Question number 4 is having to deal with problems 1, 2, and 3, right? What they just mentioned for X amount of time, right? If they mention that, like, has that impacted you personally? And then how so, right? Usually this how so is actually not needed to ask because they will just tell you. And so, but you want to probe into that as well, because if you didn't get the emotional impact, this will allow you to do so. This is not mandatory, but it helps a lot. And basically get emotional impact from problems, right? But you need to get emotion out of them, especially in B2C. Okay. Question number 5 is about the vehicle, okay, or the mechanism. So this is basically to check how they're feeling in terms of which mechanism to go for, either something they've done in the past or something that they're considering now, including your option, right? So this question, you want to ask something like, I guess, why not just do something more logical, like a more logical solution, instead of potentially doing your vehicle, right? Your mechanism. So this question is reverse psychology, right? You're basically asking them, like, why, if they mentioned something like, or typically people come onto the call saying they do mechanism A or mechanism B, right? Like, say, typically you talk to people, it's a money offer, and they're actually looking usually to do Amazon FBA or drop shipping, right? But appointment setting or closing, which is your mechanism, is not normal, right? So it's like, why not do Amazon FBA or dropshipping instead of like trying out setting or closing, right? Because then it puts them in the position to have to defend why your mechanism might be better, right? So that's for number 5. And until you get that answer, again, don't move on, right? Number 6 is, why not just do it yourself by watching free videos instead of potentially investing in the mentorship? Potentially is the keyword here, okay? You want to always ask this question lightly without asking for commitment. But again, reverse psychology. And the purpose of this is to understand their willingness or openness to invest in the program to get their problem solved, right? We'll skip this because we're going to get to this in a second, right? But again, number 5, reasons to abandon current path for the vehicle solution you have. Vehicle, not solution. And number 6 is get them to see the value of mentorship and close the door and doing it themselves, right? They cannot have the option of doing it themselves or doing other vehicles before you move on. Number 7 is, what services have you tried to solve this, if anything, and how did it go? You want to understand what they've tried in the past in order to know what to change from your pitch to adapt based on the person, right? And also how to allow them to overcome what happened in the past, right? Which we'll get to in a second, but basically not let that stop them from investing again because now they're afraid nothing will work for them, right? Which is not true, obviously. So get and solve previous fixing attempts or why they haven't invested in help before, to spot attitude red flags and trauma from previous relationships that would prevent them from investing again. Okay, super important. Now we'll move on to dream. Okay, so now is the current section, right? The current situation. It's like you introduce, right? You get the purpose of the call, right? Why are you on this call in the first place? Okay, let's understand your situation right now. What problems do you have? How has that affected you? And why are you considering this vehicle? Why not do it yourself? What have you tried in the past, right? That's part of the now section. Now we go into dream. And the purpose of dream is to understand, okay, I know your current situation, your problems. Like, where are you trying to get to? Like, what is the goal eventually, right? Like, what does that look like? What does that do for you? And all these types of questions. So as you can see, that's the goal, is get vivid emotional dream, right? You want to get them to really push those boundaries, because sometimes you're not going to get a lot of pain. And so you have to extend the goal even more, right? But regardless, you want to deepen the main as much as possible and you want to extend the goal as much as possible. So it seems like a huge gap and they're willing to pay high ticket for that. Super important, right? So the question you want to ask here is what other services or solutions are you considering now to solve this, if anything? Right? This is going to get you to understand if they're considering other programs or anything like that. So you can close those doors as well and just have yours remaining last, right? This is always about others, right? Not about convincing in this moment that they need to do with you. But the thing is, by default, if you close all other options, then, well, they have to go with you, right? It just makes sense. Next question is, what's your 6-month industry goal, right? Niche goal. This is if you weight, money goal, doesn't matter which one it is. And most importantly, challenge of flow, right? If they're giving something like, oh, I want to make 2K per month, and you know people in your program are making 10K after 3-6 months per month, then it's like, well, you got to push them, right? You want them to expand, because sometimes people get lost in how much they can achieve because they've failed so much, or they don't believe they can achieve more, and that's just sad. So we have to challenge that to inspire them to expand, how much they can achieve. And so the goal of that is to get their 6-month relevant goal. Again, this is the problem. This is the same as problem, meaning it's logical. 6-month goal, it's a logical thing. So now we want to understand the ramifications of that still in a logical way, which is, let's say you were able to get to goal, right, that they just mentioned. How would that change your life, right? This is where you can start to go into emotion, but you can stay in logic as well. And with that, you want to probe into more dream, right? Like when they mention dream, how do you mean? Tell me more about dream. Travel to which country specifically, right? So you want to get specific about the goals that they just talked about, right? About how to impact their lives. And then you obviously get more besides dream one, right? What else would you change about your situation if you want to get 1, 2, or 3 more to get specifics and get more, right? So you get more ammo. And then you ask the impact question again for the dreams, right? So how would that impact you personally? Same thing, right? So you get them, basically want them to really envision life. So getting being able to retire your mother, get the dream car, and being able to travel whenever you want and work from anywhere. I guess how would that impact you personally if you were able to do that? Oh, it would be amazing, right? Like you want to get that type of answer. People get really excited about what's next. So that's dream, okay? Now, the thing is that a lot of people now just jump straight into presenting, which is all right, but that's personally not what I've seen to work best. And this is based on something that NEPQ, Jeremy Miner, has tested a lot that I learned from, which is having he calls it the consequence section. I prefer commit because I feel like it makes them really commit to making a change now. A lot of people have pains, problems, things that they're dealing with right now, and they have all these goals, right? But they're not willing to bridge that gap. They're not willing to do whatever it takes to bridge that gap, which is the most important thing, right? If you don't have the right motivations, like doesn't matter how much pain you are or what kind of big goal you want to achieve. If you don't have a real reason why you want to do it, you're not going to change, right? So there are two questions here that are really going to help you to get that commitment. This third question is just like looping into that and confirming, right? Getting them to commit. So the first question is the consequence question, which is what happens if you don't do anything to change your situation and in X years, right, whatever time they mentioned before, like let's say 2 years, 3 years, usually like 2 years is good, but whatever amount of time, it made sense for them. What happens if you don't do anything to change your situation and in 2 years you're still in the same position? How would you feel then? So this is the trick question, and people are going to hate this. Okay, their internals, their organs, everything is going to hate this because it's uncomfortable. Okay, think about this. You just made them feel really bad for some time, right, with the current situation, and then you made them feel really good with hopeful with all the things that are possible. Now you just yanked them down again back to commit, right? Back to like, oh, what happens if it doesn't work out though, right? And people don't like that because it's a really hard question, but also because you just brought them from a place. But that's exactly what they have to feel, right? They have to go from a place of, oh, this is amazing, to back to reality. And it's like, okay, what happens if you don't get there? And they have to confront right there and then. And if they don't, well, you're going to have troubles later on, trust me. And so because of that, you want to ask this question and get them to really feel. So this question is not like, oh, what happens if I do your thing, right, and it doesn't work? Oh, I'll just try other things, right? People will say those things. So no, that wouldn't work to me. I'm definitely going to work out, right? Everything is going to work out. that's a good thing to have, right, as a person, but that's not what you're asking them. You're not asking them to be their best version. You're asking them when you have your darkest, deepest thoughts, right? Deepest, darkest thoughts, like, how do you feel about it? How do you feel contemplating the fact that in 2 years you're not going to be where you want to be? And then they have to face that reality and give you a really good reason or a really good answer to that, which is usually something like, honestly, I would be super depressed. I would be super disappointed with myself. Actually makes me think of when I was depressed 5 years ago, and then usually bring up something that I even haven't even told you before, right? So that's the first one. And again, the goal of this section is get them to commit to make a change now, no matter what. So it's get them to feel the consequences of things not changing, right? Not if this doesn't work, is if overall your situation doesn't change for whatever reason. Next question is, okay, now we know that we wouldn't be happy if things don't change, right? But in a way, it's like you could wait another 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. It wouldn't kill you, right? You can ask it that way, technically. But the way I like to ask it is, why make a change now instead of 6 months? And, or actually, sorry, the other variation of this is, why do you keep trying when most would have quit? And this is when they've tried already a lot of different things, right? This makes more sense when they haven't tried anything and they want to make the first change. This is when they've tried a lot of different things and they're like, oh, I don't know anymore. They're losing hope, right? So depending on the situation, you want to ask each. But basically, what this does is gets them to commit right now to doing it now, right? Which is get commitment reason to change now, not in 6 months, now, not a week from now, not 2 weeks from now, no, not tomorrow, today, right? Get that really strong commitment. And the answer you're looking for is basically, it's not something like, yeah, because today is the best day, or, the best time to plant a tree was like 10 years ago and today is the next best day. Nothing cheesy like that. That's not good enough. What you need is like, I just can't keep going like this. I need to change today. Like, my family is depending on me. Like, I can't go another day. Like, that's the type of answer you want to get. Strong commitment, not like some cheesy line or some like, well, it's fine, right? Like, you need to get a strong answer here, or else you're gonna get a time objection, as you can imagine. And then finally, the third thing is to confirm the solution with the reasons, right? The reasons why you think you'd be able to help them, right? So you say something like, sounds like you're ready to change. And honestly, what we could do could work for you, because you mentioned that, you have these pains, and that's something we've actually helped a lot of people with, blah, 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 right? So you get them to commit. Now we go into the pitch, okay? The purpose of the pitch is to present a solution that is 10 times better than what they've seen, tried, okay? Or what they could have imagined, right? That's depending on if they're more problem aware or solution aware. Problem aware means they are aware of their issues in their life, but they don't exactly know what kind of solutions out there, right? They're more in this type of question, which is, why make a change now, a new change, right? Whereas if they're more aware, like solution aware, um, in the awareness scale, right? They've already tried a few things, so you need to kind of show them why your thing is completely different, right? Depending on the emphasis of the situation. So this is also divided in 10 steps, right? The pitch, and it's super fun. So let's get into it. The first thing is getting permission to pitch, right? A lot of people at this point would say something like, yeah, so do you mind if I kind of give you my pitch right now, or explain to you what my program is? That's okay. It's not super bad, but it's so much smoother when you say something like, if you want, I can explain the process and you can ask questions along the way. Totally up to you. Because this gives them this gives them the illusion of control, right? You can also ask something a little bit different, which is like, I don't know if you have any questions. If you want, I can explain the process, or you can ask questions along the way. Totally up to you, right? That gives them kind of illusion of two things that are possible. So I'm actually going to add that here. I actually prefer that version. I don't know if you have any questions, or if you want, I can explain the process and you can ask questions along the way. Totally up to you. Okay. Because then it gives it gives them the illusion of control. But really, you ask them if they want to ask questions or if they want to hear you out. But either way, they're going to end up hearing you out, which is perfect. So that's the first thing, right? Get permission to pitch. Second is, okay, so what we do, this is the big statement, right? The big offer is the main thing, the main offer with the price anchor. Honestly, this is a bit more advanced, so I will just remove this because it's not entirely necessary. So this is the big defining statement that it's going to make them blow their mind, right? It's going to give them exactly what they want and remove exactly the pain that they have, so that they can see themselves hook themselves into the pitch, right? So you can get their attention from the beginning. So you want to say something like, okay, what we do is help you with big offer, right? Which is what we do is help you remove the main pain so that you can go to the main goal without biggest constraint or biggest typical problem, right? So what we do is help you get out of your 9 to 5 and start making 10K per month as a closer, without having to start your own business, something like that, right? It's the big offer that you have, which is super cool. Once you have the big offer, right, you got their attention. Number 3 is you want to introduce the 3 steps, which is something like, we've seen there are 3 steps that our clients need to be successful, right? So it gives them an idea that like, oh, if I just follow these 3 steps, I'm going to be able to get to where I want to go, right? Um, so the third step is the fourth, fifth, and sixth steps are the 3 steps that they have to take in order to get to the end goal, right? So these are timeline steps, right? Not pillars. These are timeline steps that they need in order to get to their end destination, and they're very, very well explained. A lot of people make the mistake to focus on deliverables, or meaning like the things that are included in the program, or to focus on things like all the minute details, right, that people don't care. What they care about is having a clear journey that is connected to their goal. And so this is the type of sentence that I love to use, this type of structure. You don't have to use a sentence exactly like this. You can break it down in multiple lines, but it's basically uh, mentioning what is bad, right? What have they tried maybe that is not very good, which is instead of X, right? Things that they've tried, we help you Y, which is the approach that you have for that specific stuff that is different than that, so that you can goal 1, right? And tie it into the goals that they have, right? So instead of having to start a business, we're actually going to help you learn the skill of appointment setting so that you can eventually get to 10,000 per month and quit your job, right? And then you can explain it more in depth, saying things like, basically, you're going to learn the skill of setting, which is just setting DMs in your inbox. And the 3 main pillars to that are, having a script, knowing how to role playing with others, and then also the coaching calls that you can hop on to get answers to your questions, right? So you can also present the deliverables within the steps. But the most important thing is this statement that gets them to understand why this step is so important to get them to their end goal, right? Same thing for step 2, and same thing for step 3. What I'd recommend is to have this sequential, right, where they have to go through one after the other to get their end destination after 3 to 6 months of them being in your program, right? Once you go through that, the next thing you want to do is to give them space so that they are okay, what a lot of people do here is they will finish their sorry, actually before that, before you give them space, number 7 is you want to end with the final statement. The final statement is something that gets them, it's basically the main offer, but now connecting them to their ultimate desires. So the way I like to say it is like, so that's how you go from where you are now to getting to a place where you're learning the skill of setting, and making 10K per month while you're traveling the world, right? And being able to retire your mother, right? Whatever they mention is the biggest thing for them. So that's how you end that section of explaining things, right? Once you do that, just shut up. Just like don't talk for a while. This is why I give them here space. Give space, because most closers at this point would be like, okay, so what do you think? Right? They're kind of like have this expectancy feeling. But just remember that you've been talking for like 3, 5, 7 minutes. By the way, I recommend this whole section to be 3 to 5 minutes at the most, 7 at the most, really, top stops. And so because of that, like they need to process a lot of information. One thing I did forget to mention, you want to pause after every step. Okay. You don't want to keep talking. You want to pause, check in, ask them if they have any questions. Okay. So that's important too. But in this stage, right after you've delivered everything, you want to ask if they have questions again. Do you have any concerns? Ask them multiple times. Don't just go straight into step number 9. Like sometimes people say, no, I don't have any questions. You remain silent for like 5-10 seconds, and they're like, actually like, oh, actually, I have this question. It's just human behavior, right? It's just like, don't take it at face value. Just let them process information, look at their notes and all that stuff, so that they can actually come back to you with any questions or any voicing any concerns. Okay. Once they say, no, I don't have any other questions, right? They might actually ask you, like, how much is it, right? Because they can see the value. So they're probably going to ask that. Don't answer that yet. Okay. You want to first answer all other questions, right? So if they ask you the price, say, yeah, we can definitely get to that in a second. Do you have any other questions, right? Make sure you do this. Answer all other questions first. And even then, when there are no other questions besides the price, you still want to do step number 9, which is basically a temp check. Okay. Is making sure you see, based on the presentation you just made, how they feel from 1 to 10 about it being able to get them to where they want to go. That's it. Just the process. Okay. That's why I mentioned it here. So that's the thing. Just a process from 1 to 10, 1 being I hate it, and 10 being it's exactly what I need. What number do you feel you're at? Okay. Feel is super important. You want to get a 9 plus, 9 or more. Okay. And you want to get certainty in their voice. That's what you're looking for. Now, they'll either give you a 9 or above, right? And then you want to just ask them, like, why did you pick a 9? Right? So 9 or 10/10, of course, right? And then if it's under 9, you want to ask them what's keeping you from being a 10, and they will voice the concerns. Okay. And this is where we get into objection handling. We'll get to that in a second, but this is the question you want to ask. And then finally, you want to price drop, right? Once you've solved everything there, you want to go for, so for the entire process with phases 1, 2, and 3, to get you to desires, which they just mentioned, right? To get you to retire your mom and travel while working, it's only investment amount. It's only $6,000. It's only $7,000, 7,200, whatever it is, right? And that's the price drop. So that's for pitch, okay? So the most very important thing as well about this section is that you want to connect whatever they were talking about before into this section, right? You want to connect all the pains. The more customized you can make it feel to their situation, the more they're going to feel like they're likely to achieve the process, right? The two most important things you want to look for, you want to transmit over to them, is clarity and certainty. They need to be clear on how they're going to get to their goal, and they need to be certain that they're going to get to their goal, right? Those are the two most important. So, for example, if you start talking a lot in the pitch for too long, then they're going to have a lot of information to process, and then you're going to get objections like, "Let me think about it. You just gave me a lot to think about," right? And that's not good. So you want to, and which means that they're likely uncertain, but more than that, they're unclear because it's so much to process, right? That's the pitch. And now we come to doubts, and doubts is actually objection handling, right? But the most important thing is to follow these two first steps. But we'll actually get to that in the objection handling. If you just follow and ask those questions well from the first get-go, you're going to be much further ahead. So that's for the framework. That's for the first step. Second step is energy. Okay. Identity is like, how do you show up to the call? It's the intangibles of like, when you show up to the call, like, how do you have the conversation, right? How do you connect these questions together? Like, are you curious, or you're just trying to sell? Do you show up as a leader, or do you just sound like somebody who's just trying to take their money? Things like that, right? And so this is what I've kind of put together. Okay. The first thing you want to come up with on the call, or come through, the first thing you want people to kind of notice about you is that you're caring. Okay. You want to, and I'm going to run through these, right? So you want to help them with childlike curiosity. Don't sell, right? But don't give up on them either. So basically, you want to be curious. You want to be like a kid asking questions like, oh, what about this? What about that? Really from a place of curiosity, not because you're just trying to sell, right? And it needs to come from a place of you trying to help, right? And also, you don't want to be selling, right? You want to be helping, but you also don't want to give up on them, right? You want to keep helping until they're clearly just not open to being helped in the first place, which is what we need to have from them. Of course, we're not going to force anybody. The second point is to seek to understand what they mean and show it by emphasizing and mirroring. So what this means is that don't just take what they're saying, right? Listen to what they mean behind their words, right? So that's very important, because a lot of people are going to transmit certain things behind what they're saying that you don't necessarily, if you just read the words, it would kind of be noticeable. But there's like, you have to read between the lines, right? And then once you understand it, you want to mirror back to them. It's like, oh, so is this what you mean? Right? Not exact words, like you want to paraphrase it, right? And empathize with them. Like, totally get you, man. It sounds, yeah, that sounds pretty tough. But is this what you mean? Yeah, okay, makes sense, right? Which ties into the third thing, which is to reply by acknowledging, adding value, and then asking a question. The 3 A's, right? Acknowledge what they just said. Gotcha, that makes sense. Add value. I actually heard a lot of people say that, and I'm grateful that you've been able to detect that as well and made that progression, right? Adding value, and then asking a question afterwards, right? Which is the next question in the closing process. Fourth thing is, people want to believe in you and buy. Really, like, that's a belief that you want to have. It's like, people do want to believe in you, right? They want to buy, but you have to show them that you're not just there to sell something. You're there to help them. And then they're going to unlock this. You're going to unlock this, right? Another belief that I really like is everyone is at least a deposit, right? You don't want to hop off the call with anybody without collecting at least $1 from them. I don't care. It's for their emotional commitment. Okay. The money doesn't make a difference because it's like $1, $100 doesn't matter. But by doing that, they've committed to the journey, and now it's much easier to close them on a follow up. So everyone is at least a deposit. Also, expect a no before you get a yes, right? Don't expect people to just jump in and be like, yeah, I want to buy it. It's like expect a no, and so be prepared for it by practicing, right? Hold them to their highest standards with compassion and humility and without judgment and buying their limitations. So what does this mean? Well, basically, you are the leader. You want to hold them to the highest standards that you know they're capable of, right? That if they're saying things to themselves or saying things in the call that are just not their best version, you want to challenge them and hold them to those standards while also being compassionate and humble, because you probably have been in that same situation, if not worse, right? Since you're in a position to help them in a closing call. And so you have to understand that also you're not perfect, right? If they've made mistakes in the past, you don't want to judge them for it. You want to be humble because you want to realize that, well, we're like the same. I made so many mistakes. You've made mistakes, and that's okay, right? I have compassion for you. I'm humble because I understand that I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, right? I'm just trying to figure it out just like you. And so, yeah, let's just try to figure it out, right? But at the same time, you have the paradox that you can't buy into their limitations. It's like, I don't know everything, but this sounds like this. Like, what do you think? Maybe we shouldn't think this way. I think this way would maybe help you more for the goals that you mentioned. What do you think? Right. So it's like a conversation. It's like you're introducing ideas, but without sounding judgmental, like you're telling them, no, this is not good. Right. Also, don't be super confident or enthusiastic or try to make them feel special, right? Like if it happens that they feel special, it's because of how great your questions are and how you make them feel listened to, right? But not because you actually try to make them like, oh, you're such a cool guy, I love your haircut or all that stuff, unless that's your natural, personality. But that's what like most salespeople do. So try not to do that, right? Um, be a chameleon, right? Match the prospect's words, talking speed, the vibe, the cadence, the pace, and the pitch. Like match who they are as a person, how they come across, and just be like a, like basically get in their vibe, if that makes sense. Don't abruptly interrupt targets, right? You want to interrupt them in a way that is kind of smoother, right? By doing active listening, like, okay, I see, that makes sense, right? When they're talking, and then stutter into a new sentence while raising your finger like this, right? Or pretend you have a temperature, right? So it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And oh yeah, and that reminds me as well that like, what about this other thing, right? And then you direct them smoothly into another thing, right? Or pretend you have a texture, like, oh sorry, I couldn't hear you. Like, what were you talking about? And then question, right? And to something else. Don't assume or ask redundant questions, and instead ask tailored, open-ended questions, right? What does that mean? Well, basically, you don't want to assume anything, right? You don't want to pretend that you know all their story, because that's just gonna, even if you're right, that's not the right energy. You want them to tell you. They need to tell themselves as well, right? What they're feeling. And also, you don't want to ask redundant questions because that sounds like you're just reading off a script. So whatever, like the golden rule is, don't ask questions that you already have an answer to. And if you do have to ask a question because there's part of it that you haven't answered, give context, right? Like you mentioned this, but what about that? Right. And so that kind of makes it a little bit better. So ask tailored, open-ended questions, right? Don't say, is it this or is it that? Also, right? Ask, what about this? Right? Why is it this like that? Right? And that's going to make them open up, right? Not just give them two options, A or B, because then you're doing the most of the talking and then they're just giving you, clicking on the buttons. Next thing is don't be a robot and be flexible with the framework, right? Like as much as you want to follow the questions, like you can also have framework flexibility, which is an advanced thing. So I wouldn't recommend it. But within the sections, you can be a little bit more flexible, right? And ask the questions a little bit differently depending on the situation. So, and ultimately is ask the right questions to create internal tension that leads to a good decision instead of using external pressure that triggers fight or flight mode. What does this mean? Well, by asking the right questions, you want them to have internal tension that pushes them to want to buy something to get a transformation, right? You ask them, like, what happens if in 2 years you're still in the same situation? By answering that, they're going to feel like from the inside, like, oh, I can't take that, right? So they're going to have the internal pressure, and they want to ease that by having a clear idea on how to fix it, right? But if you're using external pressure, like, well, if you sign up on the call today, right, we like action takers, um, I'll give you a 10% discount, or maybe, can get into the program and I'll give you a guarantee. Like, that's just external pressure to get them to move. That is just not useful, right? Next thing is clarity. Okay. In order for them to buy, they need to trust you. They need to trust the product, the brand, and themselves. Okay. They need to trust that and be clear on why they should trust that. Right. They need to be clear on their pain, vision, and consequence of an action logically and emotionally. Okay. Pain, vision, and then consequence of an action logically and emotionally. Right. These are the logical arguments and the emotion behind it. They need to doubt their ability to achieve the goal alone. Right. And they also need to have money and be willing to invest it and have the support of people around them, right? This is important. Honestly, this is not always important, so I'm actually going to remove it. But obviously, they need to have the money and be willing to invest it. So that's important. Next thing is certainty, right? Which is you want to take control from the start. That's why you set the frame of the call. You don't want to let them kind of ramble for too long when you ask them the reason why they hopped on. You want to take back control and be asking the questions. Whoever's asking the questions is the one that is in control, right? So you want to take control. And also, it's not about what you say, it's all about your where, right? It's your energy and way of being. This is where we get into the energy, um, which is basically like you have to be a person that is worth following, right? You have to be somebody who is attractive from their energy, right? It's not like you have a question and then that question itself is just going to magically work. It's like how you ask the question in terms of like where from, right? Like who are you as a person, and how does that affect the delivery of the question? Meaning, if you're just trying to get their money and you are willing to close whoever, and you don't filter based on who you really know you can help, then it's going to feel like that, right? It's going to feel like you just want to sell to everybody. But when you just want to sell to the fits that you can help at least a bit, all the way to really really help and they're amazing fits, then it's going to feel genuine. It's going to feel like you're actually trying to help them, which is what they want, right? Next thing is to sell with conviction and really believe in it, with resolve, fully relaxed, carefree, and even slightly humorous. What does this mean, right? Like, you want to be convicted. You want to sell something like you would sell your mother, right? And you believe in it with everything, every fiber of your being, right? And but at the same time, you want to be fully relaxed. It's like, I believe in this, right? It's not hype. It's like, yeah, this is amazing. It's just relaxed. It's like, this is amazing, honestly. Like, I've seen a lot of things, and you have a smile, right? That's why it's slightly humorous. Like, you're relaxed overall. You also want to avoid being monotone. Instead, you want to use a deep tone, which comes out after like thousands of hours experience and talking to people just like this person that's on a call with you, right? And mastering that conversation type and giving advice to people that are on those types of calls. There's like a heaviness into it that is being casted, right? It's like this depth, like this feels like important, the conversation, right? And also, the wider your range of expression is, the more certainty you will transfer, right? If I go down, up, and then I go all the way down, and all the way up, and all the way down, right? Like finishing the sentence to starting the sentence. You don't want to overdo it, that sounds weird, but it just, not only is it more entertaining, but it also sounds more genuine, and it's more certain, right? Like, because when you're relaxed, you're gonna have more range. When you're like tight, you're gonna speak in the same monotone and blah blah blah, right? Like, it's not gonna sound as good. Next is become an expert in your prospect's most common problems, right? Expert frame over sales frame. Um, so you want to be the expert. You don't want to be the salesperson, right? You're a consultant. You're not a closer. Master yourself and become the leader that is capable of making hard and difficult decisions, right? Imitate yourself when you're talking about things that you're passionate and certain about. Um, it's basically, so actually these are two separate things. So the first one is master yourself and become the leader that is capable of making hard and difficult decisions. Like, you want to be working on yourself all the time, because if you are somebody who works on themselves, it shows. And so people are going to trust you as a leader, and they're going to know you've gone through the fire, and the test, right? So because of that, they're going to trust you. They're like, oh, this guy has been through a lot, so I can trust this person, right? They know what pain is. They know my situation. And like, basically, you want to imitate yourself. Imagine when you're talking about something that you really know about, right? Perhaps it's even your business. um you want to have that type of energy. It's like you're really passionate and excited about what you're describing. And we've kind of covered this as well. So the sense of authority, it's like your movement, right? How do you express yourself with your hands, your appearance, right? How well are you dressed? And are you, do you look like you just woke up, or do you feel like ready to go, right? Connection, intent, right? These are the things that are gonna connect with the person to show your authority. Full range of expression, right? Voice and body language. We've kind of mentioned about that. Um, so an example of this is a person that's trying to be nice, demonstrating or pleasing. And basically you want to be free of what others think about you and fully express yourself, right? Resolve over pumped up energy. And this is actually something I want to add here instead, because I think it's a better place for that. Exactly. So next thing is cadence, right? You want to, and which I mentioned, right? Like it's how wide your expression is. Telling a story, right? There's drama, there's intrigue, there's different things that are going to kind of make it a little bit more attractive. The way you speak, right? Pace, tempo, intensity. Um, Also, pausing is important, right? So it sounds like there's something important you're about to say next, or you just said. Um, Empathy, because they think exactly. So when you pause, it also seems kind of like genuine because it seems like you're really thinking about it. One thing you can do is record yourself, and then based on that, like see what you can improve, right? See how you come across, and if there's something you can improve. Next thing is standards, right? We have two more things, which is standards and beliefs. Stay with me. Standards is key promises to yourself, because you can't hold someone to their higher standards if you can't live up to yours. What does this mean? Well, if you are eating junk food every day, you're not hitting the gym, you're late to calls, you are not kind to people, or compassionate, you're judgmental, to yourself, right? Let's even put it to ourselves. You sleep at different times every single day. You don't sleep enough. You're addicted to caffeine and all these things. But what do you think is going to happen? Like, how are you going to be able to lead somebody if you don't have those things under control, right? So you have to keep promises to yourself and hold yourself to the highest standards to be able to do that with somebody else, right? You can't be a hypocrite, right? So raise the bar of what you don't tolerate, right? For yourself and for others. Hold yourself to that, and what you must achieve and what you will not settle for less than in health, relationships, and money, right? Like, what do you expect from the people around you, from yourself, ultimately, right? That's what's going to set the quality of your life and ultimately your ability to influence others. So fill up and cultivate your mind with empowering thoughts and beliefs, right? Have a morning routine, meditation, exercise. Your physiology is what influences emotion, right? Take care of your body and be disciplined about daily exercise, nutrition, sleep time standards. Take control and care of your time, set boundaries and honor them, right? When you say you're going to start at this time, start at the time. And I'm not perfect at this, right? But that's the point. Like, you keep working on this on a daily basis. It's not a game that ends. Inputs dictate outputs, right? So the higher quality, the higher the quality of your inputs, the higher your quality outputs, right? So what are you learning from? What are you reading? What experiences are you having to learn, right? Are you the prospect who you want to attract, right? So if you act in a way when you're on sales calls with other people that are trying to sell you stuff, if you're like, oh, let me think about it, like, don't expect people to not have the same objection, right? Or you not being able to overcome that when it comes up. Do you make the right decision, right? Or do you lay the decision? The objections you give are the objections you will get, right? Even better than attract. Sounds better. And then your state, right? The ability to manage your emotional state, your physiology as well, right? Certainty, clarity, confidence, and courage, the ability to put yourself in an empowering state, and the ability to not get triggered on a sales call, right? And also being able to show up like a leader, regardless of how the other areas of your life are going, right? Like, I've literally had people with severe health problems, closers that I've trained, that they just keep going because that's who they've become, right? They don't let that affect them. It actually helps them like be an even better leader for the people on calls, right? So, and turning like bad days or bad weeks into bad moments, right? Specific moments of your day that just feel bad, and then you just let it go and you continue on, right? Next thing is beliefs, right? So if you have a limiting belief around money and prospect shares that same belief with you, you buy into that, you're done. You are not helping the person, right? So the first step is the awareness that we have to work on ourselves first, and then transfer that energy to others, right? Clarity and certainty. For this, you need to believe in yourself, and you need to believe in the product that you're selling, right? You need to establish that in your mind that you are the best in the world at what you do. They need your help, not the other way around, right? And they're lucky if you make them an offer. And if they say no, they're the ones losing. You need to keep showing up and helping people, right? Tomorrow, actually, you're going to keep doing that, right? You're going to keep having calls and try to help people. So it's okay if they say no. So you want to have high intention, but low attachment, right? In control, but not trying to control, right? It's about them, not about us. Like, we have the solution, they have the problem. And in every sales interaction, always remember that you are the price. The only ones who are losing are them. If they decide to stay stuck where they're at. Okay. Kind of mentioned this, so I can remove this for the most part. And always remember to stay detached from the sale. To the process, 100%, but not to the sale. So execute the process to the best of your abilities. Now, the doctor frame, right, is the set of values and beliefs about your expertise in this field, right? It's the absolute certainty of this belief. Like, you are the expert when it comes to diagnosing and prescribing solutions in your specific XYZ field, right? They see you as a field, an expert in your field. They trust you. They ask for your advice. They follow your lead, and they give people, and they're like a point of reference. You are a point of reference in the niche if they don't have a role model, right? This becomes your identity as well, right? You are a master closer. You master closing, the product knowledge, the company brand knowledge, the market knowledge, the industry acumen. You're the expert, not the prospect, right? And so this is an example, right? So we can skip that actually. So next thing is your belief system, right? You need to so ultimately what you need to do is be able to identify and overcome limiting beliefs, parasites, right? Things that eat at your brain that shouldn't be there. And you want to be able to nurture yourself with empowering beliefs, right? And so that's super important. Move this part of my training. So find wins in everything, right? Outwork yourself out, and great salesmen aren't born; they're made, right? This is something that you have control over. So that's pretty much it for identity. Now let's get back to the framework. So now that you have the framework, phase 2, step 2, you have the identity and the energy down. The third step, right, to get you to a 50% closing rate or more is objection handling. Okay. So objection handling is super simple. I call it the FIRE method. Okay. And it's here below. The FIRE method is composed of 4 parts. You have, as you can see, it spells out FIRE. Okay. So it's easy to remember. You have find the objection, doubt, right? Isolate it to make sure there's nothing else, reframe it and get them to agree with it, and then end loop by asking for a commitment. Okay. That's all you have to do. Now, the fun part is that you get to do that all throughout the call, right? Because there's 3 types of objections. You have the real objections that you get after price drop. So that's called objection handling. You have the ones that happen before the price drop. So it means objection pre-handling, right? And then you have the ones that haven't even happened, which is objection prevention, like certain behaviors or traits that you don't want them to have, that you want to prevent already from the get-go. Regardless of what it is, you always want to use FIRE. You might be able to skip isolate, but definitely not finding, reframing, or ending the loop. Those are super important. So let's go through that process, okay? Finding is basically just probing. You want to probe into what they just said until you get to the truth, right? Because there are 5 objections, and that's 5 objections, and that's about it. There's nothing else. So the 5 objections are, as you can see here, money, time, partner, fear, and value. Value doesn't even show up here because you're supposed to handle that with the pitch, right? Delivering it well and answering any questions that you have. And then if you have an issue with that, like, you basically have to fix your pitch. You shouldn't be getting any value questions. So those are the 5 objections. And so finding gets you to understand what are the objections in front of you, right? What are the doubts that are in front of you that you need to solve? And you only move on to isolation once you know exactly what the objections are and how to solve them, right? What reframe to use to solve them. So you can use tools like, if they say a statement, right? You can tell them, when you say statement, how do you mean, right? These are just examples. If they ask a question, it's like, oh, you mentioned this question. I guess I'm curious, like, why do you ask, right? If they pull away, right, like, oh, I got to hop off the call, you can say something like, sure, we can have another call. No worries at all. I guess anything you'd like to think over specifically, right? So you're probing into that. See, you're just getting to the truth. And or if you see they're unsure, right? It's not necessarily a verbal cue that they're giving you, but more of an energy. You can ask them, I might be wrong, but it seems you're still a bit unsure. Is that right? And then why is that? So basically, you want to find ways to get into the truth, right? By probing to what they said, what they showed, or ultimately what they kind of displayed through their thought process, or the fact that they want to hop off the call. Now, once you find one of these five objections, right, or four, you want to then go into isolation, which means, right, get understanding if there's anything else. So something like, no worries, I guess if you solve doubts 1, 2, and 3, right, if there's multiple objections, if there's one, just one, right, if you had the money, right, would you do it, and why though, right? So you want to make sure there's nothing else. Would you do it? If they say yes, great, with certainty, right? You ask them why. Well, because I think this is really great, blah, 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 right? And if you don't have certainty, well, that means there's something else. So you want to go back to find and probe into that until you get all objections, and until the answer they give you is hell yes. It's like, yes, I want to do this, right? If I solve this, oh, that would be amazing, right? Once you isolate and you get a reason why they want to keep going, right? If they just solved the issues that they talked to you about, now you want to go into reframe. Okay. And so these are the processes for each of the reframes in the based on what you might get. Okay. So with money, by the way, that's a lot of money. That's not an objection. Okay. That's just a reaction. Let's call it that. It's a smoke screen. So money is only money logistical, which is purely the fact that they want to do it, but they don't have the funds available, right? You say it's $5,000. I don't have $5,000 in my bank account right now. Great. Only when it's that, then it's purely just money. If it's something like, well, that's a lot of money, I don't know if I want to invest it, that could even be value, right? It could be fear. I don't know if I'm going to get the results, right? And so because of that, you really want to be clear that it's exactly what you're solving, and not just like, oh, they said it was money, it's just the money. Well, what does that mean, right? That's why you need to probe and find the real objection, the true objection. Let's say it's money though, right? You want to start off by saying, I actually might be able to find a solution for you. Would that be helpful? Right? You want to kind of get them to commit to finding a solution. And they're like, yeah, for sure. And then first you go to credit card. Okay. Have you considered a credit card to pay it off as you can? Right. And that's usually a good one, because then they can just pay in full a lot of times. If that doesn't work, right, then you can say, what do you have available currently to invest after expenses? Right. They will give you some kind of money. Right. And then you want to challenge that amount to a higher amount, right? To squeeze a little bit more. And what about in 15 to 30 days? So you set like a payment loop, right? So you want to get some kind of ability to pay in installments based on like what you allow people to do. Okay. So this is really good. If that's not enough, then you move on to number 4, which is like, how about a loan or borrowing from friends or family, or sell stuff, right? These are options that are off the call, and all these 3 beforehand, these 2 are on the call. So you want to first rule out all the things that you could do on the call, and then do off the call, right? Just to make sure. And these are ways to handle that in case they don't want to get a loan or something, right? You can say things like, there are 2 types of debt: a liability with no return, and an investment in like education that gives you return to help you reach your goals. Is this program the first or the second for you? They're probably going to say second, right? And you can finish with this, right, which is got it. And that makes, in that case, right, successful people use that to their advantage so they can move faster in life and reach their goals. Are willing to consider using that in order to make progress? And they'll be like, yes, yeah, definitely, right? So you get them to commit to loan. And ultimately, you want to end with this in case you're really not getting it, or they're not getting the results. You want to say something like, a self-made billionaire made it because they were resourceful, not because they had the resources, right? So do you want to be resourceful or powerless to your pain? Actually, pain in this case is to your financial situation. And then you want to create a plan of action to find other options to fund, right? And this is a document you can run through with all the potential funding options worldwide. Okay, it's super, super useful. Next thing is time. Okay. And again, time is not like, well, I don't know if I should be doing this now, and because I don't know if it's the right timing, or if I should even do this. Like, time should be logistical as well. And it's only if they say something like, I don't know how I'm gonna have to find going to be able to find the time now. Like, I'm super busy. How do I find the time? Right? It's super logical. It's logistical. That's it. It's not like a fear-based time where it's like people are saying, well, I don't know if it's the right thing because I don't know if I'm going to get results, and I know I'm going to have to dedicate a lot of time to be able to make this work, and things like that. That's more clouded, right? So the way you want to handle it is like, do you think it would be better to do even 10 minutes a day than not move forward at all? They'll probably be like, yeah, okay. Well, then how could you find time? Those 10 minutes a day, right? Have you considered solution, right? You can propose things to them based on what you know about their schedule. Next thing is partner. This one is a tricky one, right? Because a lot of times, sometimes it's really just the partner and you can't solve it there. And you need to get them on a call. So let's run through it, right? Number one is, okay, so how does your partner feel about you getting help so you can desires, right? Which is the goals. So you can make 10K per month and quit your job. Okay. And if you both talk and they aren't on board, your partner, right? Would you do it anyways or no? If yes, then go to end, not score, actually. Right? If they say yes, I would do it anyways, then just okay. So if you would do it anyways, I guess what if we just get started, right? And you go into commitment. If no, right, which is usually more common, you can ask them like, what do you think they wouldn't like? Right? If they needed this, you would support them, right? And then you go into number 4, which is, I'm not saying you shouldn't talk to them, just that ultimately it's your life, not theirs. You need to support you, right? For example, one time I really wanted to invest in the program, but I was worried that my partner or parents, right, if they're younger, will not agree, right? I then talked to a mentor of mine and they gave me the best advice. They told me to say this, right? If I don't do this for me, I might end up resenting you and I don't want it. Instead of complaining to you about pain, and you insert pain there, I want to join this support community of people just like me and learn from a mentor and hundreds of people at 1/10 the price. I'm not asking for your permission. I just want your emotional and financial support, right? And this basically allows you to get them on board, right? By using a suggestion, a story based on yourself, so they can decide to take that or not, right? To take that approach onto their partner. Um, and then based on that, if your partner still said no after talking, would you still not do it? If no, then book a follow up with a partner and then downsell to after talking to your partner, right? Um, what does that mean? Is basically, first, like if they say no, book a follow up with the partner. If for some reason you can't find time with the partner, then just get them to talk to the partner with this approach and then just have a call afterwards with them, right? Like in another day. Regardless, book a follow up. And then finally, we have fear. Okay. And then with fear, super interesting because there's multiple reasons why people are afraid and might not think things might work out. So I have 4 here, the 4 main ones, which is too good to be true, right? Self belief. They don't believe that, they don't have the self belief that they'll be able to make it. They think it's risky, or they have a broken decision making, which is usually like, think about it. Too good to be true is when they say things like, literally, it's too good. It feels like it's too good to be true. It's too easy. So you want to kind of counteract that by working towards this other side, which is like, well, it's not that easy, right? So you want to say something like, honestly, it's super normal to be a bit skeptical. It just needs to be in a healthy dose, right? And I make it sound like super easy, but sometimes it's really not. Like, it is simple to get to 10,000 per month, but it's not easy. Like, sometimes it'll get hard. Sometimes you'll feel like you're on top of the world. But at the end of the day, you just have to keep moving forward and follow the process, and you'll get there, right? You get their agreement, and then you move on to end, right? Self belief. Do you believe it's possible to get the results? Do you trust me to fulfill my word of helping you side by side? Do you believe you can get the results, or at least get you closer to your goals? Right? If yes, so do you believe you can get the results, or at least get you closer to your goals? If no, then why not? And then you want to add this, right? Because honestly, some of our clients came from similar or even worse situations and they succeeded. For example, and you give them an example, right? Jessica, she went through the process and blah blah blah, and she was even in a worse situation, and she was still able to make it, right? And we have tons of stories like that. So then why wouldn't you be able to get similar results, right? And you leave it at that. Get their commitment there. Next is risky, right? Eventually you'll fix it, right? So you might as well start now to get the benefits sooner. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I take your money to Brazil and party until the sun rises? Probably not, right? You want to kind of make it funny, right? Not forced. And is it easier to stay where you are so nothing changes, or invest in yourself? At least try something that in the worst case still gets you closer to your goal, and in the best case it changes your life, right? So you hit them with that. And then finally, broken decision making, right? This is when they feel like they have to think about it. And so this is like if they say, "Oh, it's a very fast decision. I just met you today," right? You want to say something like I can definitely understand that. And honestly, this is not a fast decision, right? Like you've been thinking about this situation for the last like 5, 6 months, a couple of years even. You're just deciding to do something about it now. So, and honestly, I learned that Bezos like makes billion-dollar decisions with only 70% of the information. Like now we're not him, right? So here are the two most important questions to ask yourself. Do you have all the information you need? And do you see any red flags like being rushed to the side, right? Um, so I would actually do it like this. This is a bit better. You just go straight into this, right? I learned that Jeff Bezos, right, makes billion-dollar decisions with only 70% of the information. So here are two important questions to ask yourself. Do you have all the information you need? And two, do you see any red flags like being brushed to the side? Hopefully they say like yes and no, right? But of course, if they say, well, I don't have all the information, then you ask them, okay, what's missing, right? And then maybe it's something you missed in the pitch. So that can happen. And then once they answer yes and no to these questions, you then go into, okay, so then time isn't really relevant, right? It's only a way to push the decision to the future because it's uncomfortable to make it now. So, and also you're probably not going to sit in a rocking chair and think about it, right? Like you'll just get distracted until you feel like the pain again. And in that moment, you'll make the decision. So, I mean, let's just make it now. That's basically broken decision making. Okay. Once you deliver the reframe, the most important thing is that you want to get agreement. You want them to be like, yes, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you. I've changed my mind. Right? They don't have to say that exactly, but it has to be that feeling. Or they have to be vehemently like saying yes all throughout the process. Only then do you continue into the next step. Okay. The next step is end, which is basically end a loop. Right. This is a loop. You can keep going. You can go back and forth, and basically get a commitment. So in that case, you either get a close by saying something like, "Would you be opposed to getting started?" Or say something like, "So what do you feel you need to do so when you go to bed tonight, you know you've done everything you can to quit your job and start making 10,000 per month and retire your mother, right?" That's pretty good. You can also say something like, "I guess, where would you like to go next?" Basically to gently push them towards the edge, right? And then, but the most important thing is that they cross the door, right? They jump themselves so that there's no resentful people inside of your program. Next thing is deposit. Okay. Because sometimes you just can't get a close financially, for example, or they're just like really afraid, and so you need to have another call with them. But like I mentioned, always go for the deposit minimum, right? So you can say something like, "How about we do a small deposit so that you can save your spot and lock in the investment amount, and I'll share a training with you so we don't waste time, right?" And if it's emotion, you can add something like, "And you make a micro commitment towards your future and your ideal self." Guess would that be helpful, right? And you get a small deposit. Really depends on how much you want to charge, but from $1 to minimum installment, you can work usually. And then the third is really when you can't get a close or a deposit for any reason. I don't recommend this, but where bare minimum is you have to book a follow up, right? Um, Follow up is I need to hop off, right? So how about we book another call to show you inside the program, and I can also answer questions that pop up. I guess would that be helpful, right? This is when they maybe need just a bit more nurturing in order to get the close, but it's still at least you book the follow up, and you get them curious about, oh, what's inside of the program that I haven't seen, right? So it makes them show up to the next one. And that's pretty much it for dots as well. Now, once you start like following this process well in this section, what you want to do afterwards is start preventing objections and pre-handling, right? So that's why I have these like things here that help you with that process, right? And I'm going to go into each of these. So the first one is when you ask them if they watch the video, so they understand your story and your mechanism, why it's different, right? So if they haven't watched the video, you have to go through each of these. Okay, you have to reframe them with this. You want to ask them, how long have you been following us? You then want to mention your story and authority, right? I started this way, then I went into this, I discovered this, and then it didn't work for a while, but then it finally worked, and it was amazing, and now I'm helping a ton of people. Does that make sense? Right? You want to get their commitment at the end that it makes sense. And then B is, okay, well, the basics of like, what about the mechanism, right? So the mechanism is basically, you don't want to say the mechanism, that's marketing language. You just want to explain it. And basically, this approach that I discovered is X, Y, and Z, and it's different because of this and ABC and blah, 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 right? And then you want to end with a question. Does that potentially align with what you'd like to do? and why, right? This is super important. If they watch the video, you just skip this stuff, okay? Next thing is the question about them wanting to do it themselves versus potentially investing in the mentorship, okay? And just a mentorship overall. This is where they're like, well, that's true. I could probably just do it myself, maybe. I don't know. Like they're kind of like in between. You don't want to convince anybody, right? But if they're in between, you want to kind of more than likely investing high ticket is usually better because it gets people moving, right? So you want to hit them with this reframe, which is okay. I mean, you're going to invest regardless, honestly, like either in money or in time learning it yourself, which you can't ever get back. So do you want it to take 12 weeks by having a structured like approach, or 12 years of like trial and error and kind of seeing what happens? Um, and then you kind of get them to agree, right? This is in the fire process, it's the reframe. And then you end it once you get the agreement to close the door, right? Which is close the loop as well. So you're not considering doing it yourself anymore, right? And you close that, right? So because the goal of the question is make sure they're not considering at the end of the call doing it themselves, right? Because then if you don't solve this at the end of the pitch, it's like, oh, this sounds great, but I think I might try it for another month myself, and then I will maybe consider working with you, right? Like, you gotta solve this right here. Next thing is, what services have you tried to solve this, if anything, right? Before in the past, like, and how did it go? You want to get really deep into this. So the flow is, well, why didn't it or those work for you, right? You can just stick to this. Why didn't it work for you? Or if they say, I haven't tried anything, you can ask, what prevented you from taking action? And if they say, well, it was me, honestly, like I was just not consistent, you want to ask them, okay, so then what's different about now? Right? Like you want to get them to tell you like, oh, I'm no longer that person. I want to be consistent now because it's time for me to do it. Right? That's so they have to justify to you why they're different now. And then you want to close it off again and the loop, right? Because by asking this question, you're reframing them. They have to reframe themselves. And then you want to ask, you want to say, oh, okay, so you're not considering those options anymore, right? Actually, in this case, it's not those options. It's about well, you can say the options, but it's more about like you're not considering um having that behavior anymore, right? You're not considering being that type of person anymore, right? There we go. Now if they say the program was the problem, what they bought, right? You first want to get them to take some responsibility, hopefully, right? So you want to say, could you have done more to get value from it, right? Well, maybe I could have done this and that. Right now, it puts them in the idea that maybe it was them, right? So they need better guidance. They need to learn how to be successful. And then after that, you want to ask, okay, so what's your criteria now to know if a program is good or not? Because they need to have criteria moving forward on like to know if something is good or not, or else they're going to be lost, right? If none, if they're like, well, I don't know. Okay, so what are the potential pros and cons for you in the solution, right? Um, they list them out, and then you say, okay, then you only need do it if you have no cons and the right pros. Do you feel you can make the good decisions now with that? Right now, you gave them a set of criteria. You help them brainstorm a set of criteria they're going to use to decide if something is good or not. Which, funny enough, they can use to tell if yours is good or not, which is perfect to close them. And if not, well, great. You just added a bunch of value to them, and now they're always going to remember you as that one person that taught them how to think, which is a good thing by itself. But also, it's just it's the right thing to do. But also, it's great for them to look at your program and make a decision. Now, if they've been burned before, like really a bad experience, you want to hit them with this reframe, right? The most important thing is to not let a bad experience burn you twice, right? When it first happened, and then when it stops you from a good opportunity, like as if you stopped dating after one bad high school date, right? Want to get their commitment there, and then you close them off with, but you're not considering those options anymore, right? Like the previous options that they've tried, just to close the loop with the end, right? Next thing is, what options are they considering for the future or now, right, to move forward? Um, so you want to ask them, why did you not go with those? Why not go, or why not go with those? Right? If they had a call already, then you ask, why did you not go with those? If they haven't had the call yet, then you want to ask, why not go with those? Right? And then if they're like, well, I didn't like those because blah, 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 you want to close that door as well, handle that objection and the loop with, so you're not considering those options anymore, right? Right. And then B, if they're still considering, so then you ask, so what's your criteria to pick the best solution for you? Right? Same thing as the one before. It's like, okay, what are the pros and cons? Right? If none, and they had the call, what are the pros and cons, which option, and then you ask which option is best to help you succeed long term. So you're not considering those options, other options anymore, right? And that's going to allow you to basically close the door on those things, right? If none, right, but they will still have a call. Same thing, but instead is like for the future, like what are the 3 to 5 things you need in the solution, right? And then you close with this, right? Since nothing's perfect and we can't keep looking forever, I guess if you found something with those things, right, would you consider even potentially doing it today? And then if no, pitch last, right? You don't want to pitch. You want to wait for them to have the other calls and then have the call with you. And then you say, sure, always good to see other options. Just make sure to look out for others trying to close you on a call, no matter what, because they're afraid you'll find something better. And then you can ask specifics here on how to pick, right? It's specific to your niche. Like, make sure you watch out for these types of people. They can be good, but there's this issue, right? You never want to come across as you're like super biased. Like, you can be a little bit biased, but never from a place of like clearly trying to manipulate them. It's like you just want to present information and let them decide what they think. Next thing is like number 2. Oh no, these we already covered. Okay, so here's this question, right? Again, like what happens if you don't change anything about your situation? How would you feel? So if they don't get the question, right, and they're giving you a hard time, what you want to do is ask them this way. So if you put Usain Bolt on a track, he's going to run for gold, right? But if you put a lion behind him, he's going to run even faster to save himself. So I guess, what's your lion? Like, what are you running away from, right? This also gives you kind of a good idea because it helps them understand. Like it's another way of approaching the question. The other one is, why make a change now instead of 6 months, right? And they're like, well, that's true. I don't know. Maybe I should do it in 6 months, blah, 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 right? Because I'm super busy now, right? My kids are available only in the summer and now it's the summer, something like that. Well, then you want to hit them with this reframe. Like, will you be busy in the future? Do you think it'd be better to learn to succeed in busy times then? Like, it's as if we get healthy first and then go to the hospital, right? Like, we just need to optimize your time and at least make a little progress each day. So this is pretty good to kind of set the right expectation. You finish with this, and then with the temp check, it's super important, right? But this is where you basically do basic objection handling with the FIRE method, right? Just use the reframes in here. If it's fear or if it's different things, you just use it based on what you're getting, right? When you're asking the question, what's keeping you from being 10? It will give you things, and then you handle it. But the most important thing is about the temp check is that it's about the process, right? It's not about, oh, I don't know if this is going to work for me. You handle that afterwards. But here you want to handle, okay, just the process. Do you feel like it's going to get you where you want to go? Yes, I think it's definitely the solution for me. Got it. So when you mention this uncertainty, right, now you know that it's not a value objection, right? But you mentioned this uncertainty. You don't know if it's going to work for you specifically because what is that exactly, right? And then you go into it a little bit more and you basically handle based on this process as well. And that's pretty much it. That was a bit long, but I think that's pretty useful. And that's how you go from step 1 to step 2 and step 3, right? Step 1, framework, asking the right questions. Step 2, showing up with the right energy to the call and following the correct strategy. And then step 3 is handling objections, pre-handling and preventing objections. That's how you master closing. That's how you get a 20% plus closing rate. And that's how you close a bunch of people and then get a bunch of clients into your program so you can help as many people as possible. So hope that was helpful. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.